The rain fell on Osaka like a confession. Heavy, relentless, washing nothing clean. Akira Tanaka stood in the narrow corridor of the Shimano building, her umbrella dripping onto marble floors that had seen more blood than water. She was here to translate, nothing more. That's what she told herself every time she accepted these jobs. Just words, just languages, just money that asked no questions about its origins. She greeted the feared Yakuza boss in perfect Osaka Japanese. He said, "From today, protect her." The words hung in the air like smoke. Akira's hands trembled slightly as she translated them into English for the three men in expensive suits standing across from Kenji Yamamoto. They were American investors, nervous, out of their depth. They didn't understand what had just happened. They thought he was talking about protecting their business interests. They were wrong. Kenji's eyes found hers for exactly 2 seconds. That was all it took. 2 seconds, and a lifetime of unspoken things passed between them. Things that had no business existing in a room full of criminals and desperate men. "He says your interests will be protected," Akira translated, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "No one will touch your operations. You have his word." The Americans nodded, satisfied. They didn't see the way Kenji's jaw tightened. They didn't understand that in his world, a word was worth more than any contract, any signature, any legal document. They didn't know that he had just made a promise that would cost him everything. Akira had known Kenji Yamamoto for exactly 6 months. They had never been alone together. They had never spoken beyond the necessary translations required for business meetings. And yet, she knew him the way you know someone who has already changed the trajectory of your life without permission. It started with her brother. 3 years ago, Akira's younger brother Hiroshi had made a mistake. The kind of mistake that gets you killed in Osaka. He had borrowed money from the wrong people. Not Kenji's people, but people connected to a rival organization. When he couldn't pay it back, they decided to make an example of him. They were going to break his hands. Hands that played guitar. Hands that had held their mother's face when she was dying. Akira had done something desperate. She had walked into a pachinko parlor in Dotonbori and asked for Kenji Yamamoto by name. She was 29 years old, a translator with a master's degree, a woman who had built a life on logic and language. She had no business being there. But desperation doesn't care about logic. She had found him in a back room, playing Go with an old man whose scars told stories of wars that had ended decades ago. Kenji had looked up at her, this woman he had never seen before, and somehow, he already knew why she was there. "Your brother," he had said. Not a question. "Yes," she had answered. He had set down his Go stone. "What's your name?" "Akira Tanaka." He had smiled then, a real smile, not the predatory expression she had expected from a Yakuza boss. "Same name as my grandfather. He was a good man, honest, rare in this world." He had paused. "I'll take care of it." And he had. Within 48 hours, Hiroshi's debt was erased. The men who had threatened him disappeared from Osaka entirely. No one ever explained how it happened. No one asked. That's how power works in the underworld. It moves like water, reshaping everything without leaving visible traces. After that, Kenji had started requesting her specifically for translations. Business meetings, negotiations, tense conversations with foreign crime syndicates. She had told herself it was professional. She needed the money. The jobs paid extraordinarily well. She was simply a translator doing her job. But she was lying to herself, and she knew it. Every time she saw him, something in her chest would crack open just a little bit more. She would notice things, the way he listened to people, really listened, as if their words mattered. The way he moved through rooms with a kind of controlled grace, like a predator who had learned to hide his teeth. The way his eyes would find hers across crowded rooms and hold her gaze for just long enough to make her forget how to breathe. This was dangerous. This was impossible. This was everything she had promised herself she would never allow to happen. Akira had built her life on distance. After her mother died when she was 16, after her father had retreated into silence and alcohol, after she had spent years translating not just languages but emotions, needs, desperate pleas between people who couldn't understand each other, she had learned that the safest place to be was on the outside, translating, observing, never participating, never risking. And then Kenji Yamamoto had looked at her with those dark eyes and said, "From today, protect her." And everything she had carefully constructed came crashing down. The meeting ended. The Americans left, satisfied and oblivious. Akira began packing her translation equipment, her notebook, her phone, the small recorder she used to capture nuances of dialect and tone. Her hands moved on autopilot while her mind spun in circles. Akira. She turned. Kenji stood in the doorway, alone now. His suit was immaculate, black silk that probably cost more than her monthly rent. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow that she had noticed months ago and had never stopped thinking about. She wanted to know its story. She wanted to know all of his stories. Yes? She kept her voice professional, distant, the voice of a translator who maintains boundaries. Walk with me. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't a threat either. It was something else. An invitation wrapped in inevitability. They walked through the rain-soaked streets of Osaka without speaking. Kenji didn't use an umbrella. The rain fell on his dark hair, traced lines down his face, and he didn't seem to notice. Akira held her umbrella, but the rain found her anyway. It always does when you're walking next to someone who moves through the world like a storm. They ended up at a small shrine tucked between two office buildings, the kind of place that tourists never found, the kind of place that belonged to the city's secret heart. There was a stone statue of Inari, the fox god, worn smooth by centuries of hands seeking blessings. Kenji stood before it, and for a moment, he looked like a different person, younger, almost vulnerable. "Do you know what I do?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Akira said. There was no point in lying. "Do you know what I've done?" "No, and I don't want to." He turned to face her. "That's why I asked you to come today. That's why I said what I said in front of those men. Kenji, I'm going to tell you something, and then you're going to walk away from me. You're going to stop accepting my jobs. You're going to go back to your safe life, your safe translations, your safe distance from everything that matters." He stepped closer. "And I won't stop you because it's the right thing to do." Akira's heart was beating so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "What are you going to tell me? That I'm dying?" The words landed like stones in still water, sending out ripples that would reach the edges of everything. "What?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors give me maybe 18 months, maybe less. I've known for 8 months. I haven't told anyone in my organization. They would see it as weakness, and weakness gets you killed in my world." He looked at the fox statue. "I've spent my entire life building an empire of violence. I've hurt people. I've destroyed families. I've done things that will haunt me in whatever comes after this." He turned back to her. "And then you walked into that pachinko parlor, and you asked me to save your brother, and something in me woke up that I thought was dead." Akira felt tears on her face, mixing with the rain. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of lying. Because I have 18 months, maybe less, and I don't want to spend them pretending that I don't see you. That I don't think about you every single moment of every single day. That I don't wake up in the middle of the night wondering what it would be like to be the kind of man who could deserve you. Kenji, you can't. I know I can't. I know this is impossible. I know you have a life that has nothing to do with me, and you should keep it that way." He reached out and touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "But I also know that I'm running out of time, and I'm done being careful. I'm done being the man who protects people from a distance. I'm done translating my own heart into something safer, something more acceptable." Akira closed her eyes. She could feel the warmth of his hand against her skin, and it felt like the most dangerous thing that had ever happened to her. "When I said protect her in that room," Kenji continued, "I wasn't talking about business interests. I was talking about you. I was telling every person in that building, every person in my organization, that you are untouchable. That if anything ever happens to you, if anyone ever threatens you, if you ever need anything, they will answer to me." "That's not protection," Akira whispered. "That's a target." "I know," She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man beneath the power, the human beneath the myth. She saw someone who was terrified and brave and broken and still trying to do the right thing, even though the right thing had never been part of his vocabulary. "I can't be part of your world," she said. "I know. And you can't be part of mine. I know that too. So, what are we doing?" Kenji smiled. That real smile, the one that made him look like his grandfather must have looked, like a good man, like someone capable of redemption. "We're standing in the rain at a shrine, making wishes to a fox god who probably stopped listening to prayers 100 years ago. We're doing the most impossible thing two people can do." "What's that?" "We're choosing each other anyway." The next morning, Akira woke to a message on her phone. It was from Marcus Reed, the American journalist she had met 3 months ago at a translation conference in Tokyo. He was charming in that effortless way that Americans often are, confident without arrogance, interested without being invasive. He had asked her to dinner. She had said yes, thinking it was safe, thinking it was the kind of normal, uncomplicated thing that people like her were supposed to do. The message read, "I'm in Osaka for a week. Would love to see you. There's something I want to talk to you about." Akira stared at the words. She thought about Kenji, about the rain, about the impossible choice she had made in that shrine. She thought about the 18 months he probably had left, maybe less. She thought about how love was supposed to be safe and predictable, and how the most important things in life were never either of those things. She typed back, "Yes, tonight. 7 o'clock. The cafe near Osaka Station." Then she blocked the message from her mind and tried to focus on the translation work she had scheduled for the day. But her hands shook as she worked. Her concentration fractured. She kept thinking about what Kenji had said. "We're choosing each other anyway." By evening, she had changed her clothes 3 times. She had done her makeup and washed it off and done it again. She had called her brother Hiroshi and hung up before he answered. She had stood in front of her mirror and asked herself what she was doing, and she had no answer that made sense. Marcus was already at the cafe when she arrived. He stood up when he saw her, and she was struck by how uncomplicated his smile was. There was no darkness behind it, no secrets, no 18-month countdown to oblivion. He was just a good-looking American man who liked her and wanted to spend time with her. And that should have been enough. "Akira," he said, pulling out her chair. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she said, sitting down. They ordered coffee. They made small talk about his work. He was investigating corruption in Japanese business, looking for connections between legitimate companies and organized crime. He was good at his job, she could tell. He had the kind of focused intensity that made him dangerous to people with things to hide. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I know this might seem forward, but I feel like we have a real connection. And I'm going to be in Osaka for at least another month, maybe longer. I was wondering if you'd like to spend more time together. Real time, not just coffee meetings." Akira looked at him. She thought about how easy it would be to say yes, how simple her life could be if she chose this path. A normal relationship with a normal man, no violence, no secrets, no countdown clock. "I can't," she said quietly. "Why not?" She wanted to tell him the truth. She wanted to say, "Because I'm in love with a Yakuza boss who is dying, and I just made a choice that will probably destroy both of us. Because I've spent my whole life translating other people's emotions, and I'm terrified of what happens when I finally have to speak my own truth. Because I'm broken in ways that you can't fix, and I'm not brave enough to let you try. Instead," she said, "because I'm not in a place where I can give you what you deserve." Marcus set down his coffee cup. "Is there someone else?" "Yes," she said, and it was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in years. He nodded slowly. She could see the disappointment in his face, but also something else, a kind of understanding. "Is he good to you?" Akira thought about Kenji standing in the rain, about the way he had touched her face, about the way he had chosen honesty over protection, vulnerability over power. "No," she said, "but I'm good to him, and that's enough." Marcus smiled sadly. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I don't," Akira admitted. but I'm doing it anyway. She left the cafe and walked through the streets of Osaka. The rain had stopped, and the city was gleaming under the lights. She pulled out her phone and called Kenji. "Yes?" He answered immediately, like he had been waiting for her call. "I told him no," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Because you were right. We're choosing each other anyway, and I'm not going to do that halfway." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Where are you?" "Walking through Dotonbori." "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, a black car pulled up beside her. Kenji was driving. He reached over and opened the passenger door, and Akira got in without hesitation. They drove through the city in silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of everything they weren't saying, everything they would never be able to say out loud. He took her to a small apartment overlooking the Okawa River. It was minimalist, almost austere. The home of a man who had never learned to accumulate things because he had never expected to keep anything. There were no photographs on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that suggested a life lived rather than a life endured. "This is where I live," he said. "When I'm not conducting business, when I'm just existing." Akira walked to the window and looked out at the river. The water moved in the darkness, carrying things downstream that no one would ever see again. "I want you to know something," Kenji said behind her. "I'm not a good man. I never will be. But I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to be better. And if you're willing to be part of that, if you're willing to let me love you, really love you, not from a distance, not through protection, but actually be with you, then I will spend every single day making sure you don't regret it." Akira turned to face him. "I'm scared," she said. "I know. I'm scared of what this means. I'm scared of what will happen when your organization finds out. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of what I'll become if I let myself love you completely." "I know," he said again. And he crossed the room and held her, and she let herself be held by someone who understood fear the way only people who have lived in darkness can understand it. They didn't sleep that night. They sat on his balcony overlooking the river, and Kenji told her stories about his life, the things that had led him to where he was, the choices that had seemed necessary at the time but had calcified into regrets. He told her about the first person he had hurt, about how easy it had been, about how each subsequent act of violence had been easier than the last, until he had become a man who could order someone's death without feeling anything at all. And Akira listened, and she translated his pain into something she could hold, something she could understand. Because that's what she had always done. She had taken the incomprehensible and made it comprehensible. She had bridged the gap between worlds that had no business touching each other. "Why did you save my brother?" she asked as dawn began to break over the river. "Because he was worth saving," Kenji said. "And because I wanted to know the woman who would be brave enough to walk into a pachinko parlor and ask a Yakuza boss for help." "I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Desperation is just bravery that doesn't know its own name yet." As the sun rose over Osaka, Akira realized that she had crossed a line that she could never uncross. She was no longer a translator standing on the outside, observing other people's lives. She was inside the story now. She was part of the narrative, and she had no idea how it would end. But for the first time in her life, she didn't need to know. She was willing to live in the uncertainty, to move forward without a map, to choose someone anyway, even though it was impossible, even though it was dangerous, even though it would probably destroy her. Because some things are worth the risk. Some people are worth the fall. And as Kenji held her hand and watched the sunrise over the river, Akira understood that this was what love actually was, not the safe, predictable thing she had always imagined. It was this: two people choosing each other in the darkness, knowing that the light might never come, but deciding that it didn't matter. They would create their own light, even if it only lasted 18 months, even if it only lasted one more day. 3 weeks into their relationship, Akira discovered that loving Kenji meant living in a state of constant contradiction. By day, she was a respectable translator with a growing reputation in Osaka's business community. By night, she was the woman who belonged to the city's most feared Yakuza boss. The two versions of herself existed in separate universes that were not supposed to collide. But collisions, she was learning, were inevitable. It started with small things. A man from Kenji's organization would appear at her apartment building, ostensibly to ensure her safety. Her favorite cafe would suddenly have a new owner, someone connected to Kenji's network. Her brother Hiroshi called her one afternoon, nervous and confused, to tell her that someone had paid off his student loans. All of it. Completely. No explanation, no request for repayment. "Akira, what's happening?" he had asked. "Who did this?" She couldn't tell him. So she had lied and said it was a translation bonus. He didn't believe her, but he didn't push. That was the thing about having a sister connected to the underworld. You learned not to ask too many questions. The real problem started when Marcus Reed didn't leave Osaka. He was supposed to be there for a month. Then his editor extended his assignment. Then he got a lead on a story. Something about money laundering through legitimate businesses, connections between organized crime and international finance. He called Akira 3 times, asking if she wanted to grab coffee, if she wanted to help him with some translations, if she wanted to introduce him to people in the business community who might talk to him. She declined every invitation. But Marcus was persistent in the way that good journalists are persistent. He showed up at her apartment one evening with takeout and a smile that suggested he didn't understand the word no. "I'm not taking this personally," he said, setting down containers of ramen on her kitchen counter. "I just think we could be friends, and I could use a friend in Osaka." Akira wanted to tell him to leave. She wanted to tell him that being her friend was dangerous, that proximity to her was a liability, that he was investigating the exact world that now owned her. But he looked so genuinely lonely, so genuinely interested in her well-being, that she found herself making tea instead. They talked for 3 hours. Marcus told her about his childhood in Chicago, about his parents' divorce, about the way journalism had become his way of making sense of a chaotic world. He told her about the corruption he had uncovered in Tokyo, about the connections he was starting to see between legitimate businesses and organized crime syndicates. He told her about how he had started noticing patterns. Certain companies, certain transactions, certain names that kept appearing in his research. "There's this guy," Marcus said, leaning forward with the intensity that made him dangerous. "Kenji Yamamoto. He's not as public as some of the other bosses, but he's everywhere. His fingerprints are on everything. Money laundering, extortion, protection rackets. But here's the thing, he's also doing something else. He's moving money into legitimate businesses. He's investing in real estate development, in tech startups, in things that don't make sense for a Yakuza boss to care about." Akira's hands went cold. She set down her tea very carefully. "What are you saying?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "I'm saying I think he's trying to legitimize his operations. I think he's trying to transition from crime to legitimate business. Which means there's a story here, a big one. A Yakuza boss trying to go legitimate? That's not something that usually ends well. Either he gets killed by his own organization for betraying them, or he becomes something worse, a criminal with the appearance of legitimacy." "And you want to write about this?" Akira asked quietly. "I want to understand it first. Then yes, I want to write about it. Because if I'm right, this could be the biggest story of my career. It could expose connections between organized crime and legitimate business that go all the way to the top of Japanese society." Akira stood up. "You should leave." "What? Why?" "Because you're asking me questions that I can't answer. Because you're investigating something that you don't understand. Because you're going to get hurt, and I don't want to watch that happen." Marcus stood too. "Akira, what's going on? Do you know something about Yamamoto?" "No," she lied. "I just know that some stories aren't safe to tell. Some truths aren't worth the price of telling them. That's not how journalism works. That's not how truth works. Maybe not, but it's how survival works." After he left, Akira sat in her apartment and tried to decide what to do. She called Kenji. "We need to talk," she said. They met at the shrine again, their place, the place where impossible things had become possible. Kenji was waiting for her, standing before the fox statue like a man making a prayer to a god he didn't believe in. "Marcus Reed is investigating you," Akira said without preamble. He's looking for connections between your organization and legitimate businesses. He thinks you're trying to go legitimate. Kenji didn't seem surprised. I know. You know? And you haven't done anything about it? What would you have me do? Kill him? Threaten him? That's the old way, Akira. That's the way I've been operating for 20 years. And it's gotten me to a place where I'm dying at 34, with nothing but blood on my hands. So what are you doing? I'm letting him investigate. I'm letting him find out the truth. Because the truth is, he's right. I am trying to go legitimate. I've been moving money into clean businesses for the last 2 years. I've been trying to build something that will survive me. Something that doesn't require violence to maintain itself. Akira felt something crack inside her chest. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to know the full extent of what I've done. I didn't want you to understand exactly how deep the corruption goes. How many people I've hurt. How many lives I've destroyed in the process of building this empire. He turned to face her. I wanted to be the man you could love without having to compromise your own morality. That's not fair, Akira said. That's not love. That's protection. And I told you I don't want that. I know. But I'm terrified, Akira. I'm terrified that if you know everything, if you understand the full scope of what I am, you'll leave. And I can't. His voice broke. I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I finally have something worth living for. Akira wanted to be angry. She wanted to tell him that he had no right to make decisions about what she could or couldn't handle. But she also understood something in that moment. That Kenji was as trapped as she was. He was caught between two worlds, trying to build a bridge between them, and the bridge was crumbling under the weight of everything it was supposed to carry. Tell me everything, she said. No more protection. No more decisions made for me. Everything. So Kenji told her. He told her about the businesses he owned, about the money he had laundered, about the people he had hurt in the process. He told her about the men in his organization who were starting to question his leadership, who saw his investment in legitimate business as weakness. He told her about the rival organizations that were circling, waiting for him to show vulnerability so they could strike. And he told her about his plan, a plan that he had been working on for the last year, a plan that would have been impossible if he hadn't gotten sick, if he hadn't suddenly understood that mortality was not theoretical but immediate and real. I'm going to transfer control of my legitimate businesses to a trust, he said. The money will be distributed to people who need it, victims of organized crime, families of people I've hurt, organizations that work against the Yakuza. I'm going to liquidate my criminal operations. I'm going to use my remaining time to undo as much damage as I can. That's suicide, Akira whispered. Your organization will never allow that. They'll kill you. Probably, Kenji said calmly. But at least I'll die as someone who tried to make things right. At least I'll die as someone who loved you enough to give up everything. No. Akira grabbed his face between her hands. No, you're not doing this. You're not sacrificing yourself for some idea of redemption. That's not love, Kenji. That's just a different kind of running away. What do you want me to do? I want you to live. I want you to fight. I want you to find a way to do this that doesn't end with you dead. Kenji pulled her close. I don't know if there is a way. Then we find one together. But even as she said it, Akira knew that the situation was spiraling beyond their control. Marcus was getting closer to the truth. Kenji's organization was getting restless. And somewhere in the spaces between these two worlds, something was going to break. It broke 3 days later. Akira was at home, working on a translation project, when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Akira Tanaka? The voice was male, older, with the accent of someone who had spent decades in Osaka's underworld. Yes. Who is this? My name is Takeshi Sato. I'm the second in command of Kenji Yamamoto's organization. I'm calling because I need to meet with you. Alone. Tonight. If you don't come, I'm going to have to hurt people you care about, starting with your brother. The line went dead. Akira sat in her apartment, her hands shaking. She called Kenji immediately. Don't go, he said. This is a trap. Takeshi has been waiting for an opportunity to move against me. He's going to use you to… To what? To get to you? Kenji, he's already got to me. I'm already leverage. The only question is whether I go willingly or whether he takes me by force. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. But maybe I can negotiate. Maybe I can buy us time. Akira, I'm going. I'm meeting him. And you're going to stay away from it. If you show up, he'll kill us both. If you stay away, there's a chance, just a chance, that I can talk my way out of this. She hung up before Kenji could argue further. The meeting was set for midnight at an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Akira took a taxi there, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She had never been this afraid. She had never understood, until this moment, what it meant to be truly vulnerable. Takeshi Sato was waiting for her inside the warehouse. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with scars that told stories of decades spent in violence. He was not alone. There were 5 other men with him, all of them armed, all of them watching her with the kind of hunger that made her skin crawl. Akira Tanaka, Takeshi said, smiling. Thank you for coming. I was worried you might not understand the seriousness of the situation. What do you want? Akira asked, keeping her voice steady. I want to know why Kenji Yamamoto is throwing away everything we've built. I want to know why he's suddenly interested in legitimacy and redemption and all the other weakness that comes with a conscience. Takeshi stepped closer. And I want to know what you have to do with it. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I've been watching Kenji for months. I've seen the change in him. I've seen the way he looks at you. I've seen the way he's been moving money, liquidating operations, preparing for something. And I want to know what it is. Akira realized in that moment that she had a choice. She could tell Takeshi everything. About Kenji's cancer, about his plan for redemption, about the way he was trying to undo decades of violence. And in telling him, she would sign Kenji's death warrant. Or she could lie and hope that her lie was convincing enough to buy them time. Kenji is sick, she said quietly. He's dying. He has maybe a year left, maybe less. He's trying to get his affairs in order. That's all. Takeshi's expression didn't change. And you? What are you to him? I'm someone he cares about, someone he wants to protect. By making you a target? By putting you in the middle of his organization? Takeshi shook his head. That's not protection, girl. That's cruelty. Maybe, Akira said, but it's his choice to make. No, Takeshi said. It's my choice to make now. He nodded to one of the men behind him. The man grabbed Akira's arm, and she felt the cold metal of a gun barrel pressed against her ribs. Here's what's going to happen, Takeshi said. You're going to call Kenji. You're going to tell him to meet you here. You're going to tell him that you're in danger, that he needs to come alone. And when he gets here, we're going to have a conversation about the future of his organization. He won't come, Akira said. He's too smart for that. He'll come, Takeshi said with absolute certainty. Because he loves you, and men in love make stupid decisions. Akira's phone was taken from her. She was forced to make the call, forced to speak the words that would bring Kenji into a trap. She could hear the fear in his voice when she told him where she was, what was happening. She could hear him trying to figure out how to save her, how to get out of this impossible situation. I'm coming, he said. Just hold on. I'm coming. After she hung up, Takeshi smiled. Now we wait. The waiting was the worst part. Akira sat in that warehouse, surrounded by men who wanted her dead, and she thought about all the choices that had led her to this moment. She thought about walking into that pachinko parlor 3 years ago. She thought about the shrine in the rain. She thought about the way Kenji had held her on his balcony overlooking the river. She thought about how love had brought her here, to this place where everything was about to fall apart. Kenji arrived 40 minutes later. He came alone, as instructed, and Akira could see the calculation in his eyes as he assessed the situation. The number of men, the weapons, the distance between him and her, the probability of getting out of this alive. Takeshi, Kenji said, his voice calm and controlled. I wasn't expecting this. Weren't you? Takeshi stepped forward. You've been preparing for this for months, haven't you? You've been planning your exit, your redemption. Your escape from everything we've built together. I've been planning my legacy, Kenji said. There's a difference. The only difference is that you're a traitor. You're betraying the organization. You're betraying me, and you're doing it for her. Takeshi gestured toward Akira. A woman. A translator. Someone who has no business being part of our world. You're right, Kenji said. She has no business being part of this world, which is why I'm going to get her out of it. How? By dying? By sacrificing yourself so she can live with a clean conscience? If that's what it takes. Takeshi laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the warehouse. You really do love her. That's pathetic, Kenji. That's weakness. Maybe, Kenji said. But it's also the first honest thing I've felt in 20 years. What happened next occurred so quickly that Akira's mind could barely process it. Kenji moved, not toward Takeshi, but toward her. He grabbed her hand and pulled her behind him, and in the same motion, he threw something at the ground. Smoke erupted, thick and choking, filling the warehouse in seconds. Gunfire erupted. Akira heard bullets hitting metal, heard men shouting, heard the chaos of violence unfolding around her. Kenji was pulling her through the smoke, toward a door she hadn't known existed. They burst through it into the night air, and she could hear the sound of an engine running. A car was waiting for them, Kenji's driver, who had apparently been positioned outside the warehouse the entire time. They threw themselves into the back seat, and the car accelerated into the darkness. Are you hurt? Kenji asked, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. No! Akira gasped. How did you… I knew Takeshi would make a move eventually. I've been preparing for it. I had people watching the warehouse. I had an exit strategy planned. He pulled her close. I told you I would protect you. But now they know. Now they know everything. They know about your plan, about your betrayal. I know. Which means we're out of time. We need to leave Osaka. Tonight. We need to disappear. We can't just disappear. My brother, my apartment, my life. Your life is with me now, Kenji said. Everything else is secondary. Akira wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that you couldn't just abandon your life, that there were consequences to running, that they couldn't hide forever. But she also knew that he was right. The moment Takeshi had pulled a gun on her, the moment Kenji had chosen her over his organization, everything had changed. There was no going back to the life she had before. The car drove through the night, taking them to a safe house on the outskirts of Osaka. It was a small, nondescript building that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable. A bed, a kitchen, supplies for several weeks. How long have you been planning this? Akira asked. Since the day I got my diagnosis, Kenji said. I knew that if I was going to die anyway, I might as well die trying to change something. I might as well die trying to be someone better than I've been. And me? Where do I fit into your plan? You were never part of the plan, Kenji said. You were the thing that made the plan worth executing. They sat together in that safe house, listening to the sounds of the city outside, knowing that everything they had built was crumbling. Kenji's phone rang, a call from someone in his organization. He answered it, listened for a moment, then hung up. Takeshi has declared himself the new leader, Kenji said quietly. He's telling people that I've abandoned the organization. He's telling them that I'm weak, that I'm a traitor, that anyone who follows me is a traitor too. What does that mean? It means that by tomorrow morning, there will be a price on my head. It means that every person in my organization will be looking for me. It means that we have maybe 24 hours before this entire city becomes too dangerous for us to stay in. So we run, Akira said. So we run, Kenji agreed. But even as they made plans to leave, even as they prepared to disappear into whatever came next, Akira couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. There was a piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. A thread that, if pulled, would unravel everything. That thread was Marcus Reed. He called her the next morning, his voice urgent and frightened in a way she had never heard before. Akira, I need to see you. It's important. I found something about Yamamoto, something that changes everything. I think he's in danger. I think people are trying to kill him. Akira's blood went cold. How do you know that? Because I've been investigating his organization, and I've uncovered something. There's a coup happening. Someone named Takeshi Sato is trying to take over, and I think Yamamoto is trying to stop him. I think he's trying to do something good, and it's going to get him killed. Akira realized in that moment that Marcus had figured out what Kenji was trying to do. He had pieced together the puzzle from the outside, from the perspective of someone looking in. And he was right. Kenji was in danger. They all were. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm at my hotel, room 412. Please, I need to talk to you. I need to understand what's happening." Akira looked at Kenji, who was listening to the conversation with an expression of resigned acceptance. "Go," he said. "Talk to him. Tell him the truth. Tell him everything. If I do that, he'll write the story. He'll expose your organization, your plan, everything. I know, and maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe the only way to stop the violence is to shine a light on it. Maybe the only way to save me is to let the world know what I've been trying to do." Akira went to see Marcus. She told him everything. About Kenji. About the cancer. About the plan for redemption. About Takeshi's coup. About the danger they were all in. She told him the story that he had been searching for, but not the story he expected to find. And Marcus, being a good journalist and a good man, made a choice. He called his editor. He told her that he had a story, but not the story he had been planning to write. He told her about a Yakuza boss trying to go legitimate, about a man trying to undo decades of violence before he died, about the cost of redemption in a world that didn't believe in it. The story ran in the Tokyo Times 3 days later. It was front-page news. It exposed the connections between organized crime and legitimate business. It revealed Kenji's plan to transfer his assets to victims and anti-Yakuza organizations. It showed the world exactly what was happening in Osaka. And it changed everything. The morning the story broke, Akira watched Kenji's face as he read the article on his phone. His expression didn't change. No anger, no fear, no regret. Just a kind of quiet acceptance, like a man who had been waiting for this moment and was relieved it had finally arrived. "It's done," he said simply. The article was devastating in its precision. Marcus had documented everything. The money laundering operations, the legitimate businesses used as fronts, the victims of organized crime, the plan Kenji had been executing to transfer his wealth to those he had harmed. But more than that, Marcus had told Kenji's story in a way that made him human. He had written about a dying man trying to find redemption. He had written about love as a catalyst for change. He had written about the possibility of transformation, even for someone who had spent decades in darkness. The response was immediate and chaotic. Within hours, law enforcement agencies across Japan were mobilizing. The National Police Agency opened an investigation. The Public Security Intelligence Agency became involved. International authorities started looking into the money trails that Marcus had exposed. But the most dangerous response came from within the Yakuza itself. Takeshi Sato held a press conference, something unprecedented for organized crime in Japan. He stood before cameras and denounced Kenji as a traitor who had betrayed the Yakuza code. He claimed that Kenji had been working with law enforcement, that he had been planning to testify against his own organization, that his redemption was nothing more than a cover for cooperation with the authorities. It was a brilliant move, Akira realized. By accusing Kenji of being a police informant, Takeshi was essentially issuing a death sentence. In the Yakuza world, there was no crime worse than betrayal to the authorities. It didn't matter that Kenji hadn't actually cooperated with police. The accusation alone was enough to turn every member of every organization against him. "We need to leave Japan," Akira said, packing clothes into a bag with shaking hands. "We need to leave tonight." "No," Kenji said calmly. "What do you mean, no? Takeshi just accused you of being an informant. Every Yakuza in the country is going to be looking for you. We can't stay here." "I know, but I'm not running anymore." Akira stopped packing. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about facing this. I'm talking about turning myself into the authorities. I'm talking about testifying against my own organization, about exposing everything I've done, about accepting the consequences of my actions." "That's suicide," Akira whispered. "No," Kenji said. It's the opposite of suicide. It's the first time I'm actually choosing to live, really live, instead of just existing in the shadows. Kenji, please, listen to me, he said, taking her face between his hands. I have maybe a year left, maybe less. The cancer is progressing faster than the doctors predicted. I can feel it. I can feel my body shutting down, cell by cell. So the question is, how do I spend that year? Do I spend it running? Do I spend it hiding? Do I spend it letting fear dictate my choices? You spend it with me, Akira said. You spend it alive. I am alive. For the first time in my life, I'm actually alive, and I'm not going to waste that by running. Kenji called his lawyer, a woman named Yuki Matsuda, who had been representing him for years, and who, it turned out, had been helping him plan his transition to legitimacy all along. He told her that he wanted to turn himself in and cooperate fully with authorities. He wanted to provide testimony about his organization's operations, about the crimes he had committed, about the people he had hurt. Yuki tried to convince him that this was a mistake, that he would spend whatever time he had left in prison, that there was no redemption worth that price. But Kenji was resolute. There is, he said, because the alternative is letting Takeshi continue to run the organization unchecked. The alternative is allowing the violence to continue, allowing more people to be hurt, allowing the cycle to perpetuate. If my testimony can stop that, if my cooperation can help dismantle the organization, then it's worth it. The authorities came for him at dawn. Federal agents surrounded the safe house, and Kenji walked out with his hands raised, surrendering himself completely. Akira watched from the window as they put him in a car and drove him away, and she felt something inside her break that she wasn't sure could ever be repaired. She was taken in for questioning as well. They wanted to know everything. How she had met Kenji, what she knew about his operations, whether she had been complicit in any crimes. She answered their questions carefully, telling them what they needed to know without implicating herself in anything that would keep her from being able to help Kenji. It was Marcus who helped her navigate the legal system. He had become an unexpected ally, someone who understood the complexities of what was happening and who seemed genuinely invested in helping both Kenji and Akira find a way through this nightmare. He's going to go to prison, Marcus said, sitting across from her in a coffee shop 3 days after Kenji's arrest. Even with his cooperation, even with his testimony, he's going to face significant prison time. The crimes he's committed are serious. The victims are numerous. There's no way around that. How long? Akira asked. 10 years, maybe 15. Depending on how much he cooperates, depending on how much damage his testimony does to the organization, it could be less. But Akira, you need to understand something. He's dying. He might not survive 10 years in prison. I know, Akira said quietly. He knows too. And he's made peace with it. Have you? Akira didn't answer. How could she make peace with the fact that the man she loved was going to spend whatever time he had left in a prison cell? How could she accept that the redemption he was seeking would come at the cost of their time together? But she had to accept it. Because Kenji had chosen this path, and she had chosen to love him. And love, she was learning, sometimes meant accepting the choices of the person you loved, even when those choices broke your heart. The trial was a media sensation. Kenji's testimony was broadcast live on every news channel in Japan. He sat in the witness box and calmly, methodically, described decades of violence. He named names. He provided dates. He explained the structure of his organization, the way money flowed through it, the way violence was used to maintain control. Akira watched from the gallery, and she saw something in Kenji's face that she had never seen before. Peace. He was finally telling the truth. He was finally being honest about who he was and what he had done. And even though it was destroying him, even though it was sending him to prison, there was a kind of freedom in that honesty. The prosecution built an airtight case based on his testimony. Takeshi Sato and 17 other members of Kenji's organization were arrested. The Yakuza network that had operated in Osaka for decades began to crumble. But there was a complication that no one had anticipated. During the investigation, authorities discovered that Takeshi had been embezzling from the organization for years. He had been skimming money, running parallel operations, building his own power base. And more than that, He had been the one responsible for several unsolved murders. Murders that had been attributed to rival organizations, but that had actually been committed by Takeshi to eliminate his competition within Kenji's organization. When confronted with this evidence, Takeshi made a choice that shocked everyone. He confessed to the murders. He provided details that only the killer could know. And then, in his prison cell while awaiting trial, he took his own life. The suicide sent shockwaves through the Yakuza underworld. It was seen as an admission of guilt, a recognition that he had dishonored the code. It was also seen as an act of cowardice, taking the easy way out instead of facing the consequences of his actions. Kenji, when he heard the news, simply nodded. He was always weak, he said to Akira during one of their prison visits. He just hid it better than most. The visits were the hardest part. Akira would sit across from Kenji in the visitation room, separated by glass, speaking through phones, and she would try to find words that could bridge the distance between them. But there were no words adequate to the situation. There was only the fact of his imprisonment, the ticking clock of his illness, the knowledge that their time together was running out. "How are you feeling?" she asked during one visit, 3 months into his incarceration. "Tired," he said. "The cancer is progressing. The doctors say I have maybe 8 months left, maybe less. We can appeal. We can try to get you released on compassionate grounds. We can—" "No," Kenji said gently. "I'm not going to appeal. I'm going to serve my time. I'm going to face the consequences of what I've done. Even if it kills you? Especially if it kills me. Because that's what redemption is, Akira. It's not about getting what you want. It's about accepting what you deserve and choosing to be better anyway." Akira wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him that redemption was a luxury, that it was something for people who had time, that he was wasting the precious months he had left on a principle that no one cared about. But she also understood that this was what Kenji needed, not to escape the consequences of his actions, but to face them, not to run from his past, but to stand in it and acknowledge it and accept responsibility for it. "I love you," she said. "I know," Kenji replied. "And I love you. That's why I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to live. I need you to take the life we were supposed to have together and live it for both of us. I need you to not waste your time visiting me in prison, not waste your energy trying to save me. I need you to go out into the world and be happy. Can you do that?" "No," Akira said. "I can't." "You have to." "I won't." Kenji smiled. That real smile, the one that made him look like a good man. "Then I guess we're both stubborn." Over the next months, Akira did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She started working with Marcus on a book about what had happened. She told her story. The story of falling in love with a Yakuza boss, of being caught between two worlds, of watching someone choose redemption over survival. Marcus was a skilled writer, and he treated the material with respect and nuance. He didn't sensationalize it. He didn't turn it into a melodrama. Instead, he wrote it as what it was. A love story set against the backdrop of organized crime and the possibility of transformation. The book was published 18 months after Kenji's arrest. It became a bestseller in Japan and was eventually translated into English and published internationally. It sparked conversations about redemption, about the possibility of change, about what it means to love someone who is broken. And it brought Akira a kind of unexpected fame. She was invited to give talks about her experience. She was interviewed by journalists. She became, in a strange way, the public face of Kenji's redemption. But the most important thing the book did was give Kenji a voice beyond the prison walls. Through Akira's words, through Marcus's careful documentation, Kenji's story reached people who would never have heard it otherwise. It reached people in the Yakuza who were questioning their own choices. It reached young people who were considering joining organized crime. It reached victims of Yakuza violence who suddenly understood that the man who had hurt them was also capable of remorse and change. Kenji's health continued to deteriorate. The cancer spread to his liver, then to his bones. The prison doctors did what they could, but there was only so much medicine could do against stage 4 pancreatic cancer. By the time Akira visited him 2 years into his incarceration, he was skeletal, barely recognizable as the man she had fallen in love with. I don't have much time left, he said during one of their final visits. His voice was barely a whisper. I know, Akira said. I want you to know that I don't regret any of it. Not the crimes, not the prison, not the pain, because it all led to you. It all led to this moment, to knowing what it feels like to be loved by someone who sees all of me, the darkness and the light, and chooses me anyway. Kenji, let me finish. I need to say this while I still can. He pressed his hand against the glass, and Akira pressed hers against it from the other side. I spent 34 years being a man who hurt people. I spent 34 years building an empire of violence. And then I got sick, and I met you, and suddenly I understood that there was another way to live. That redemption wasn't about erasing what I had done. It was about acknowledging it and choosing to be different going forward. You did that, Akira said. You changed. Because of you. Because you believed that I could. Because you loved me when I didn't deserve to be loved. Kenji died 3 weeks later in the prison hospital, with Akira holding his hand. He was 36 years old. He had served less than 3 years of his sentence. But in those 3 years, he had done more to dismantle organized crime in Osaka than law enforcement had done in decades. His testimony had led to the conviction of over 50 Yakuza members. His cooperation had exposed money laundering networks that reached into legitimate business and government. But more than that, his death, and the way he had lived those final years, had changed something in the culture of Osaka. It had shown that redemption was possible, that people could change, that love could be a force powerful enough to transform even the darkest hearts. At his funeral, which was attended by both law enforcement officials and members of the Yakuza community who had come to pay their respects, Akira stood and told his story. She talked about the man she had fallen in love with, about the choices he had made, about the way he had chosen truth over protection, redemption over escape. Kenji Yamamoto was not a good man, she said. He did terrible things. He hurt people. He destroyed lives. But he was also a man who, when faced with his own mortality, chose to be better. He chose to face the consequences of his actions. He chose to use whatever time he had left to try to undo some of the damage he had caused. And I think that's what redemption actually is. Not the absence of sin, but the choice to acknowledge it and try to be different. After the funeral, Marcus approached her. He had been covering the story for a major international publication, and he had watched Akira transform from a woman broken by love into someone who had found meaning in that brokenness. What will you do now? He asked. I don't know, Akira said. I feel like I've been living in a story that wasn't mine for so long. I don't know who I am outside of that story. Then maybe it's time to find out, Marcus said. Maybe it's time to write your own story, not just translate other people's. Akira considered this. She thought about all the years she had spent on the outside, translating other people's emotions, other people's needs, other people's lives. She thought about how Kenji had pulled her into the center of the story, had made her a protagonist instead of an observer. She thought about how that had broken her and healed her simultaneously. I think I need to travel, she said. I think I need to get away from Osaka for a while. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by my relationship to a Yakuza boss. That sounds like a good idea, Marcus said. And when you figure it out, maybe you'll write about it. Maybe you'll tell the world who Akira Tanaka is when she's not translating other people's stories. Akira left Osaka 3 months after Kenji's death. She traveled through Southeast Asia, through Europe, through places where no one knew her name, where no one knew her story. She worked as a translator, but she also did something she had never done before. She started writing. She started documenting her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own journey toward understanding who she was and what she wanted from life. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. But healing, she discovered, didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean moving on in the way that people usually meant when they used that phrase. It meant carrying Kenji with her, carrying the love and the loss and the transformation, and allowing it to shape who she became. She also discovered something unexpected, that Marcus had fallen in love with her. Not the version of her that had been defined by Kenji, but the version that was emerging from the ashes of that relationship. The version of Akira that was learning to live for herself, to make choices based on her own desires, rather than in reaction to someone else's needs. I know the timing is terrible, Marcus said when he finally told her how he felt. They were sitting in a cafe in Bangkok, thousands of miles from Osaka, from the prison, from all the darkness that had defined their previous encounters. I know you're still grieving. But I wanted you to know that I see you. I see who you are becoming. And I think you're extraordinary. Akira looked at him. This man who had started as a journalist investigating her lover, who had become an unexpected ally, who had helped her tell her story to the world. She thought about how love came in different forms, how it could be passionate and destructive like what she had shared with Kenji, but it could also be gentle and supportive, like what Marcus was offering. I'm not ready, she said. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to love someone the way I loved Kenji. I'm not asking you to, Marcus said. I'm just asking you to let me be part of your life. I'm asking you to let me love you, even if you can't love me back in the same way. I'm asking you to give yourself permission to be happy. And so Akira said yes, not because she had stopped loving Kenji, she would never stop loving him, but because she had learned that love wasn't a finite resource. You could love someone who was gone and still have room in your heart for someone who was present. You could honor the past while building a future. 2 years after Kenji's death, Akira stood in the lobby of a modern office building in Tokyo, holding a folder that contained documents she had been gathering for months. The building housed the headquarters of the Yamamoto Foundation, an organization that had been established using the assets Kenji had transferred before his arrest. The foundation worked to provide support for victims of organized crime, to fund rehabilitation programs for former Yakuza members seeking to leave the life, and to support research into the social factors that led people into organized crime in the first place. The director of the foundation was a woman named Sachiko Nakamura, a former prosecutor who had worked on organized crime cases for 20 years before deciding to shift her focus to prevention and rehabilitation. She had reached out to Akira 6 months ago, asking if she would be willing to serve on the foundation's advisory board. Akira had agreed, and now she was here for her first official meeting. Akira, Sachiko said, embracing her warmly. Thank you for coming. I know this must be difficult. Being back in Tokyo, being so close to Osaka, being surrounded by reminders of Kenji. It's not difficult, Akira said, surprising herself with the truth of it. It feels right. It feels like I'm finally doing something that honors what he tried to do. They settled into a conference room overlooking the city. Sachiko pulled up a presentation on a large screen, showing the foundation's work over the past 2 years. The numbers were staggering. They had helped over 300 former Yakuza members transition out of organized crime. They had provided support to over 500 victims of Yakuza violence. They had funded research projects at universities across Japan, exploring the sociology of organized crime. But there's something else, Sachiko said, her expression becoming more serious. Something that I wanted to discuss with you privately before the board meeting. What is it? Akira asked. We've been contacted by someone from inside the Yakuza. Someone high-ranking. Someone with significant power. He wants to meet with us. He says he has information about ongoing operations, about crimes that are still being committed, about people who are in danger. And he specifically asked for you to be present at the meeting. Akira felt her stomach tighten. Who is it? I don't know. He's been very careful about his identity. But Akira, I need to be honest with you. This could be dangerous. This could be a trap. This could be someone trying to use the foundation to get to you. Why would they want to get to me? Because you're connected to Kenji. Because you testified about his organization. Because there are people in the Yakuza who blame you for his downfall, who see you as a traitor to their world. Akira considered this. She had known, intellectually, that there were risks to being publicly associated with Kenji's redemption. But she had also spent the last 2 years trying to move beyond fear, trying to live a life based on something other than survival instincts. Set up the meeting, she said. I'll go. Akira, I need to do this, Sachiko. I need to know if there's someone else out there who's ready to do what Kenji did. I need to know if his death meant something, if his sacrifice opened a door for other people to walk through. The meeting was arranged for a week later, at a neutral location, a small temple in the mountains outside of Kyoto, a place that had been used for centuries as a space where enemies could meet without violence, where sacred ground offered protection that transcended the normal rules of the underworld. Akira drove there alone, despite Sachiko's protests. She had learned that some journeys had to be made solo, that some conversations could only happen when you were willing to be completely vulnerable. The man waiting for her at the temple was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to power. He introduced himself as Hiroshi Nakamura, and Akira's breath caught in her throat because the name was the same as her brother's, though this man was clearly not him. "I know who you are," Hiroshi said, bowing respectfully. "I know your story. I know about Kenji Yamamoto and what he tried to do." "Why did you want to meet with me?" Akira asked. "Because I'm trying to do the same thing he did. I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to dismantle my organization from the inside, and I need help." They sat in the temple's garden, surrounded by carefully arranged stones and ancient trees, and Hiroshi told her his story. He had been born into the Yakuza. His father had been a boss, his grandfather before that. He had never had a choice about his path. By the time he was old enough to question it, he was already too deep, too compromised, too invested in the system to imagine an alternative. But 5 years ago, his daughter had been born. And holding her in his arms, he had understood something that he had never understood before. That the world he was building, the empire he was constructing through violence and intimidation, was a world that would eventually consume her. That if he didn't change, if he didn't find a way out, she would grow up in a world defined by his choices. "I've been planning my exit for 3 years, Hiroshi said. "I've been moving money, establishing legitimate businesses, building connections with people who can help me transition out. But I'm stuck. Because if I just disappear, if I just walk away, my organization will fall into chaos. There will be a power struggle. People will die. The violence will escalate." "So what do you want to do?" Akira asked. "I want to do what Kenji did. I want to cooperate with authorities. I want to provide testimony that will help dismantle the organization. I want to use my knowledge to prevent future violence. But I'm terrified. I'm terrified of what will happen to my family. I'm terrified of prison. I'm terrified of dying the way Kenji died, alone in a cell, my body consumed by disease." Akira listened, and she felt something shift inside her. She had spent the last 2 years trying to move beyond her connection to the Yakuza world, trying to build a life that was separate from that darkness. But she realized now that she couldn't separate herself from it. She was forever marked by her love for Kenji, forever connected to his world, forever responsible for helping others find the path that he had found. "I can help you," she said. "But I need to be honest with you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be terrifying. You're going to lose everything. Your freedom, your family, possibly your life. And there's no guarantee that it will be worth it." "I know," Hiroshi said. "But the alternative is continuing to live a lie. The alternative is allowing the violence to continue. The alternative is teaching my daughter that her father was a coward who chose comfort over conscience." Over the next 6 months, Akira worked with Hiroshi and Sachiko to prepare for his cooperation with authorities. They connected him with lawyers, with federal agents, with people who could help him navigate the legal system. They helped him document his organization's operations, helped him gather evidence, helped him prepare for the moment when he would turn himself in. But there was a complication that no one had anticipated. Hiroshi's organization discovered what he was planning. One of his subordinates, a man he had trusted for years, had been working as an informant for a rival organization. That informant had reported Hiroshi's plans to his handlers, who had immediately informed Hiroshi's rivals that he was about to cooperate with authorities. The response was swift and brutal. Hiroshi's lieutenant was found dead in a hotel room, his body bearing signs of torture. A message was left with the body: "Stop talking, or everyone you love dies." Hiroshi called Akira in a panic. They know everything. They're going to kill my family. They're going to kill me. We need to move up the timeline. We need to do this now." Akira contacted Sachiko, who contacted federal authorities. Within hours, Hiroshi's family was placed in protective custody. Hiroshi himself was extracted from Osaka and brought to a secure location where he could prepare his testimony. But the Yakuza didn't stop with threats. They escalated. 3 days after Hiroshi's family was placed in protective custody, there was an attack on the Yamamoto Foundation's offices in Tokyo. A man walked into the building with a gun and opened fire, killing 2 employees and wounding 3 others before being subdued by security. The attacker was identified as a member of a rival Yakuza organization. Someone connected to the people who wanted to prevent Hiroshi from testifying. Akira was in the building when it happened. She was in a meeting with Sachiko when they heard the gunshots. They took shelter in a secure room, and Akira found herself back in that familiar place of terror, back in that space where violence was suddenly, shockingly real. When the police arrived and secured the building, Akira emerged from the secure room to find chaos. Emergency responders were everywhere. The 2 dead employees were being removed on stretchers. Blood stained the marble floors of the lobby where she had stood just days before, full of hope and purpose. She called Marcus, who was in Tokyo on assignment covering the story of Hiroshi's cooperation with authorities. He arrived at the Foundation's offices within an hour, his face pale with fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "No," Akira said. "But 2 people are dead. 2 people who were just trying to help victims of organized crime. 2 people who had nothing to do with Kenji or Hiroshi or any of this." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "And I'm so sorry." That night, Akira sat in her hotel room and questioned everything. She questioned whether Kenji's redemption had been worth the cost. She questioned whether Hiroshi's attempt to do the same thing was worth the lives that were being lost in the process. She questioned whether her involvement in all of this was causing more harm than good. She called Sachiko. "I want out," she said. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of something that's getting people killed." "Akira, listen to me," Sachiko said calmly. "The people who died today didn't die because of what we're doing. They died because there are people in the Yakuza who are terrified of change. They died because Hiroshi's cooperation threatens the power structure that has existed for decades. They died because violence is the only language that the Yakuza understands." "So what? We just accept that? We just keep going, knowing that more people will die?" "No," Sachiko said. "We keep going because if we don't, if we let fear stop us, then the Yakuza wins. Then violence wins. Then the message becomes clear. If you try to change, if you try to do the right thing, we will kill you and everyone around you. And that message will ensure that no one ever tries to change again." Akira understood what Sachiko was saying. She understood that sometimes the only way to stop violence was to move through it, to refuse to be intimidated by it, to continue doing the right thing, even when that thing came at a terrible cost. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay." Hiroshi's trial was one of the most significant organized crime prosecutions in Japanese history. He provided testimony that implicated over 100 members of his organization. He detailed decades of violence, corruption, and criminal activity. He provided evidence that led to the conviction of his own lieutenants, his own family members, people he had worked with for years. And he did it knowing that by doing so, he was ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. He did it knowing that his daughter would grow up visiting him behind bars, that she would grow up with the knowledge that her father was a criminal, that she would carry the shame of his choices for the rest of her life. But he also did it knowing that by doing so, he was breaking the cycle. He was showing his daughter that even when you've made terrible choices, even when you've hurt people, even when you've built your life on a foundation of violence, you can still choose to be better. You can still choose to do the right thing. You can still choose redemption. The trial lasted 6 months. During that time, Akira attended every day of testimony. She sat in the courtroom and listened as Hiroshi described the crimes he had committed, the people he had hurt, the violence he had perpetrated. She watched as he faced the consequences of his actions with a kind of quiet dignity that reminded her of Kenji. And she realized something profound, that redemption wasn't a destination. It wasn't something you achieved and then moved on from. It was a process, a continuous choice, a daily decision to be better than you were yesterday, to acknowledge your failures, to try to make amends. After the trial ended, after Hiroshi was sentenced to 15 years in prison, Akira visited him in his cell. He looked smaller than he had before, diminished by the weight of what he had done and what he had chosen to do about it. "Thank you," he said, "for helping me find the courage to do this." "You found the courage yourself," Akira said. "I just helped you recognize it." "My daughter asked me something before I came here," Hiroshi said. "She asked me if I was scared, and I told her yes, I was terrified. But I also told her that being scared wasn't an excuse for not doing the right thing. I told her that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing anyway." "That's a good thing to teach her," Akira said. "I learned it from Kenji," Hiroshi said. "Through you. Through your story. Through the way you loved someone who was broken and helped him find a way to heal." After Hiroshi's conviction, the Yakuza organization that he had led essentially ceased to exist. The power vacuum that his cooperation created led to a series of conflicts between rival organizations, but ultimately, the structure that had existed for decades was dismantled. The Foundation was able to help over 500 members of that organization transition out of the Yakuza and into legitimate work. The attack on the Foundation's offices had a paradoxical effect. Instead of intimidating people into silence, it galvanized support for the Foundation's work. Donations poured in from across Japan and internationally. Universities began offering scholarships to former Yakuza members who wanted to pursue legitimate careers. The government increased funding for anti-organized crime initiatives, and Akira, almost without realizing it, had become the public face of redemption in Japan. She gave talks at universities. She worked with the Foundation to develop programs for at-risk youth. She became an advocate for criminal justice reform, arguing that the system should focus not just on punishment but on rehabilitation and the possibility of change. Marcus documented all of it. He wrote articles, then a second book, chronicling the ripple effects of Kenji's redemption. He showed how one man's choice to change had inspired others to make the same choice. How love had become a catalyst for transformation that spread far beyond the two people who had experienced it. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Akira's relationship with Marcus deepened. It wasn't the passionate, all-consuming love she had shared with Kenji. It was something quieter, something more stable, something built on a foundation of genuine partnership and mutual respect. They moved in together in Tokyo. They got married in a small ceremony at the temple where she had first met Hiroshi. They built a life together that was grounded in purpose and meaning, in the work of helping others find their way toward redemption. 3 years after Kenji's death, Akira received a letter from the prison where he had been incarcerated. It was from the chaplain who had been with Kenji when he died. The letter contained Kenji's final words, written in his own hand, addressed to Akira. "My dearest Akira," the letter read. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I've asked the chaplain to hold this letter for 3 years before sending it to you, because I wanted to give you time to move forward, time to build a life that wasn't defined by my death or my memory. I want you to know that I don't regret anything, not the crimes I committed, not the prison time, not the pain I caused you, because all of it led to you. All of it led to this moment, to knowing that my life, as broken and violent as it was, could still mean something, could still inspire change, could still matter. I'm asking you to do something for me. I'm asking you to forgive me. Not for my sake. I'm beyond forgiveness now. Beyond redemption. I'm asking you to forgive me for yours. Because carrying anger and resentment will only poison your own life. And you deserve to be happy. You deserve to live a life that's defined by love and purpose, not by the shadow of my choices. I also want you to know that I see you, even now, even from wherever I am. I see the work you're doing. I see the lives you're changing. I see the way you've taken the love we shared and transformed it into something that helps others, and I'm proud of you. I'm so incredibly proud of you. Live well, Akira. Live fully. Live for both of us. And know that every time you help someone find their way toward redemption, I'm there with you, cheering you on, grateful that my life, however brief and broken, could contribute to your happiness. Forever yours, Kenji. Akira read the letter 3 times, and each time she cried. But they were different tears than the ones she had shed before. They were tears of gratitude, tears of acceptance, tears of understanding that love didn't end when someone died. It transformed. It evolved. It became something bigger than the two people who had experienced it. She showed the letter to Marcus, who read it silently, and then pulled her close. "He was right," Marcus said. "You have built something beautiful from the ashes of what you shared. You've taken tragedy and transformed it into purpose." "We've built something beautiful," Akira corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." 5 years after Kenji's death, the Yamamoto Foundation opened a new facility in Osaka, a rehabilitation center for former Yakuza members and their families. The center was named after Kenji, and at its opening ceremony, Akira stood before a crowd of hundreds of people and told his story one more time. She talked about the man she had fallen in love with. She talked about the choices he had made. She talked about the way he had chosen redemption over escape, truth over protection, love over power. She talked about how his death had not been the end of his story, but the beginning of something larger, something that would continue to help people long after he was gone. Kenji Yamamoto was not a hero, she said. He was a man who had committed terrible crimes, who had hurt countless people, who had built his life on a foundation of violence. But he was also a man who, when faced with his own mortality, chose to be better. He chose to acknowledge his failures. He chose to try to make amends. He chose love over everything else. And I think that's what we're all capable of. I think that's what redemption actually is. Not the absence of sin, but the choice to acknowledge it and try to be different. Not the absence of failure, but the choice to learn from it and do better. Not the absence of darkness, but the choice to move toward the light anyway, even when you're terrified, even when you